Hello everyone, I am Noopur, your host, and I'm back with another interesting interview. And today I have Neeti Sharma with us. Hi Neeti, how are you?
Hi, Noopur. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. To our audience, let me tell them a little bit about yourself, Neeti. Neeti is a co-founder and president of TeamLease Edtech, TeamLease Group Company. Recently, she was featured among the top 100 women leaders globally in the tech space by HononLQ. That's a great achievement, Neeti, and good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to chat with you, Noopur, as always. And I hope this conversation provides some nice insights and learnings for all of us.
Same here, Neeti. I'm looking forward to some great takeaways from you. And to start with, I'll talk about what currently is happening in the industry, right? We are facing tremendous layoffs happening all across the world. In such a scenario, do you think reskilling and upskilling hold the same significance as earlier?
Yeah. So obviously there are layoffs happening. In some sectors, it's more than the other sectors. There are various reasons why people are asked to go home or leave jobs. Let us also understand, like let's say the IT sector had hired a lot of people, when the pandemic hit us and the digitalization or the digitization requirements had hit the roof. Especially in the Indian scenario, it also is true for global, employers as well. And now at some point the rationalization had to kick in. So earlier they were hiring too much, there were great resignation, there's this the various buzzwords that we kept hearing for the last 2 3 years. Right, at some point the rationalization had to happen. Obviously with the economic slowdown, there are certain sectors that get impacted first, and that is where we are seeing that there are people who've been laid off, right? So let's take your question in two parts. One is, what can the employer do to ensure that their productivity and their employees stay, whoever they want to retain? And the other is, what is it that the employee or the job seeker can do to ensure that they stay relevant, right? So that whenever they're looking for the next job, they're able to get the job rather than saying, hey, there's nothing happening in the market. So to the first part, we still see that employers continue to make investments in upskilling and reskilling their existing workforce, with probably a couple of objectives. One is that they want to ensure that their employee base remains relevant and agile to the market conditions, right? Tech adoption has obviously gone up the roof. We've seen that lots of changes happen on a continuous basis. If as employees, or if my employees are not skilled enough to meet the customer demands, then I'll not be able to deploy them. And this is largely applicable for the tech sector. But even the other sectors like the retail, the banking finance sectors, hospitality, healthcare, everywhere skill becomes of prime importance the moment we have these difficult changes in the market. And as you see, these things happen maybe every 5 to 6 years. There are ups and downs within industries. Sometimes it is the tech industry, other times it's the other industries. I mean, right now we are reading about IT and the banking industry is getting impacted the most. But actually, obviously, there'll be ripple effect for other sectors as well, because these two large industries have some impact. Right? So I think employers continue to skill and upskill their employees to ensure that they stay relevant, also so that they stay productive, because in these difficult market situations, most employers will not be able to take too many people to do a certain project or a certain task. So their intent would be, how do I improve productivity of my existing workforce? How do I ensure that the people I want to retain stay back with me and not leave this job looking for some other jobs because of the uncertainty that the environment has around us, right? So that's really where the employers continue to make the investment. On the employee side, two things. One is, of course, if I still have my job, can I upskill myself to stay relevant, right? To remain productive for the employer. I know whether the employer funds my learning or I fund my learning is a big question. There's always a debate on who pays for learning. So one is that part. The other part is, if in case the employee has been laid off for some unfortunate reasons. And I can guarantee you that no employer would want to lay off people unless and until that's the only last option that's available for them, right? So in case that situation has occurred in your life, I would suggest that again, upskill yourself, reskill yourself, if needed, learn newer skills. So it's not just, hey, you know what, I'm a customer service agent, so let me keep upskilling myself and stay in that job role. I could probably also do a couple of other adjacent job roles, and for that I may have to learn newer skills. So as a job seeker, as somebody who has to look for newer employment opportunities, I would suggest that employees or candidates themselves have to make small investments, and ideally these investments should not happen after one is laid off. This has to be a continuous process. We all have to ensure that we keep learning newer skills on the go. So whether I continue with my job here or whether I look for another employment opportunity, I should actually be skilled enough so that I don't have a challenge in finding my next job.
Thanks for wonderfully explaining the whole situation. Why the layoffs are happening is also important to know. And organizational leaderships are under a lot of pressure of making it right now.
Right.
So what is your advice, Neeti, to the organizational leaders, especially to bridge the skill gap for their employee? I think one of the reasons a lot of people are being sacked is because there is a skill gap.
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
So,
yeah.
like I said earlier, Noopur, learning is not a one-time process, right? It's a journey. So each one of us as employees have to create our own learning journeys and pathways. Even employers have to ensure that all the employees that are there with them, right, they have a certain learning curve defined, and leaders have to ensure that that learning actually gets executed in the right manner. Now, whether it is the CEOs, the CHROs, the L&D leaders, the business leaders, whoever is responsible for the employees and their productivity, we have to all build a continuous learning path for our learners, and not just classroom learning or self-learning or digital learning. We realize that over the last 2 decades, the generation that has gotten into the workforce is very keen to apply what they have learned on the go. So it's not like put me into a learning class for 3 months and then you put me onto a project. Ideally, all of this should go hand in hand. So when the learner is actually, applying what they're learning in class, whether it's digital or physical classes, we believe that the efficacy of learning has, increases quite a lot. And this is what I would suggest, that leaders have to look at building a learning curve or learning path for every employee, ensure it gets executed well. Also, maybe over a period of time, start adopting newer learning techniques and tools, right? So it's not like just put everybody in a class or just give somebody some login and it's some, people start learning. The way learners are now looking at learning is more personalized, right? More effective, more interesting. So again, it's not just an animated video or a game. I mean, the pedagogy of learning shifts as we go along from generation to generation, and as technology adoption also increases, even in the learning world. So to leaders, I would really say build a learning path, a learning curve for every employee, ensure it gets executed. And also they have to note that the learning, whatever path or career that they're creating for their employees, it has to actually be relevant to the employee as well. So it's not just what I want, but also what the employee wants. I think we have to bring the two worlds together and then create a learning path.
Yeah, absolutely. Neeti, in last couple of years, especially last 3 years, we have seen the kind of challenges we used to see in a decade, right? You may call it because of corona outbreak or whatever it is, but I believe that it has become quite quick.
Mm.
So have you experienced any change in organizational culture once the world resumed back after the coronavirus outbreak? And the following question I have is, can culture be a bottleneck in upskilling?
Mhm. Yeah. So again, two questions here, Nupur. there has been a shift clearly. When everybody started working from home, a lot of people actually faced health challenges, for themselves, their families. The first 2 months were extremely difficult. We didn't know what hit us. The first part of learning that a lot of organizations asked us was, how do I train my managers to be empathetic? Right? So typically, if I would call my team member, I would just pick up the phone, say, hey, what's happening? What are the numbers like? Have you met this client? What is, things like that, right? It was more transactional pre-pandemic. But post-pandemic, we've seen that the empathy of co-workers, peers, managers, leaders has really increased, which is a very good thing. Right? We actually put managers and leaders through training programs saying, when you're doing the first video call with your employee, with your team member, first thing you should ask is, how are things at home? Somebody in the family was impacted by the virus. Are things better now? Are they back on track? Can I help you with something? We actually had to put managers and leaders through these training programs, and then you start your transactional conversation. So I think the organization DNA kind of has changed. Managers, leaders have learned to be more empathetic. That clearly is a shift, and I don't see that going anywhere, because it just becomes a cultural, what do I call, a ecosystem that we are creating in every organization. And it's also a must now, because if I just do the regular conversation saying come today, come tomorrow, come to office, work from wherever, right? I think employees are also seeking a lot more engagement with the managers and leaders. So I think that shift is happening, very clearly post pandemic, to your first question. To your second question, every organization has a different culture. Some organizations try and build a learning culture, early on of their lifespan. Some of them start building over a period of time because they realize that my employees are not skilled enough, and can I now start putting them into learning? Right? So yes, culture does play a huge role. There are some organizations where learning is part of the process. I join in an organization, I have a 1 month boot camp along with my induction and onboarding, and then I am given a roadmap saying every month you have to do this kind of learning. So whether you do 2 hours, 1 hour, you earn some credits. So a lot of organizations have built that as part of their ecosystem and DNA. And clearly, those organizations actually reap the benefit, as they go along, rather than just making learning a sporadic activity or a need-based activity. So yes, culture definitely creates a big impact on the learning bit.
All right, Didi. And now coming back to how to create an ecosystem of skill development in today's world. We have passed on the stage of being hit by the pandemic,
Yeah,
and we resumed back to work. It's been quite some time that we are normalizing the hybrid work culture and work from home and 5 days or 3 days work. So it's getting on track. So how do we
yeah,
create an ecosystem of learning or skill development in current times?
sure. So I think it has to be driven from the top. If you just expect every employee to start learning by themselves by default, it's not going to happen, right? Especially in our Indian context, because a lot of us still believe that once I've got my first job, I'm set for life. So I don't need to make investments on learning, right? Though that's changing, I also see that today's generation is hungry to learn new skills and try different things, right? But then it's only the leaders that can start creating an ecosystem, a surround sound around learning, at every town hall or every conversation that they're doing with the teams, right? Talk about how important learning, upskilling, reskilling, and new skilling is, to the organization, thereby thereby showing the importance that they're making that investment in their employee base, right, on a continuous basis. So it's again, I've said that earlier, create a learning path for every employee. And by default, what happens is then organizations end up creating a upward trajectory for their own organization. So I think that's what leaders will have to start focusing on. Of course, I don't believe that it's only the employers who have to make the investment. Employees also have to make investments in their own upskilling and identifying new skills. So, do some sort of a skill gap for yourself. The employers do the skill gap for the organization and the employees. And, come somewhere in between, create a journey, uh, which is a win-win for both the employee as well as the organization.
Absolutely. Thank you, Neeti, for answering questions in detail. And with that, we'll move on to the next segment, which is going to be a rapid fire. Starting with which is your favorite movie?
Movie. Okay. So while of course there are lots of Indian classics, that I love, but one movie that has made an impact on me is The Intern. I think it got released in 2015. Robert De Niro, was the lead character along with Anne Hathaway. It just very clearly talks about how much we can learn from somebody, right? I mean, the movie was all about, a retired person, a 70-year-old person coming back to full-time employment, and how people, in that organization learned from his experiences, from his skills, just the patience that he has to do things. Obviously, there is a generation gap. I mean, 2, 3 generations later is where he's come in. But I thought that was a movie that makes huge impact and a great signaling value about learning, from people otherwise.
And what is your favorite food, the comfort food you would always go to?
I think comfort food for any Indian would probably largely be dal chawal. So whenever you're traveling, you want to come home and have garam khana. I think that's very important. But yeah, I like to. I'm a vegetarian, so I do try many other cuisines, right from Japanese to Pan Asian to Spanish to Italian. But of course, ghar ka khana is always the best thing at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Niti, any quote you remember that has a huge impact on your, like maybe in your school days, in your college days, maybe in your professional life, something that has left you with a huge impact?
Yeah. So maybe not one, but I would just probably say two. One is really koshish karne walon ki haar nahi hoti. There was also, this whole narrative around that quote, and I still believe that if you have to achieve something, you have to take the first step. You have to put in the efforts, without which nothing's going to happen, right? So that's one thing that I mean that's become like a philosophy for me that I go by. The other quote that I also believe very strongly in, and I read it many years ago, is that success is not success is a journey, not a destination. It's not like you said, I've got my graduation, I'm done with it. I've got my postgrad, I've got a job, I'm done with it, right? It's a journey. It's forever, and all of us obviously keep vying to do things more, right? But defining what success means to me would be very important, and then ensure that I build up build a path to get to where I want to go.
Yeah, these are two beautiful quotes. I think I also somewhere get inspired with them in my life. And the last question is, if you have to gift anybody a book,
Hmm.
which book would you like to gift?
Okay, I think one book that I keep gifting a lot of people, and I think now they're bored, by now, is a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Very interesting book on how she deals with people's thinking on fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I think amazing book, and I would recommend almost everybody to read it.
All right. Thank you, Neeti. It was amazing to know you. Now we would like to conclude the whole discussion. We have touched upon many aspects of layoffs happening in today's time, how to upskill, how to create the ecosystem. Now let's conclude with one advice for today's organizational leaders to be future ready and foreseeing what kind of challenges may come.
Yeah. So I think the biggest learning that I have had, and that's what I would put across, is be aware of the changing environment early on. Read signals, right? Identify people in your team who could be, who could take you to your journey, right, to the goals that you're aiming for yourself. Also be, how do you call, I used the word empathetic previously, but I think you need to know what your employees are going through. I think it's important to understand, to be compassionate with people's problems and solutions. Obviously, don't that write every other decision of yours, but I think as an organization, and we spoke about people skills. I think leaders have to ensure that their organizations are agile, relevant, skilled enough, okay, and ready for the next big shift. I think it's important that organizations build that for themselves.
All right, yeah. It was some great takeaways this discussion was having. Thank you, Neeti. It was wonderful chatting with you, and I hope the audiences enjoy this discussion.
Thank you, Noopur, and wonderful having this chat with you once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.